Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Preparing Your Website for 2017, brought to you by WebAscender. My name is Stephanie, and I'll be your host today. I've been with WebAscender for about 6 years, and I currently lead the digital marketing team here. For those of you who don't know, WebAscender is a website design, development, and digital marketing company in the Lansing, Michigan area. For today's webinar, I'd love it if you would join the conversation around preparing your website for 2017 with me. So we have 2 ways for you to do that. You can tweet your questions at any time throughout the webinar, and we'll also have a Q&A at the end using the hashtag WebPrep2017. If you're not on Twitter or you don't want to tweet your questions, you can also email your questions to im@webascender.com. There's 3 key topics that we'll be covering today, all concerning preparing your website for 2017. We'll start out with what's changed in websites, what's changing with website digital marketing in 2017, and how you can take advantage of that for your business. Then, once you have all of those ideas of things that you can do, we'll go over how to prioritize what makes sense to actually implement for your business and for your website. And then we'll go a little bit into a concept called growth-driven development, which is centered around the idea that your website should always be improving, and we'll talk about how you can implement a plan to or a process to continuously improve your website in the year to come. Our first topic that we're going to get started with is 2017 website trends. What do you need to know to make your website the best that it can be in the new year? The first trend is user-driven content. So if you've joined us for previous webinars or just marketing, sales in general, you should be familiar with personas. And user-driven content really just means creating content that targets your personas or those kind of fictional representations of who your target customer or audience is, and answering their problems and their questions that you can solve for them versus kind of the old way of focusing your website content on your products, your features, your services, what you can provide to them. So user-driven content is really driven by the problems that your personas have. And this has really become a trend as we've shifted away from outbound and traditional marketing methods like cold calling, mass mailing, and more towards inbound marketing methods that educate your prospects, inform them, engage with them, much more two-way versus the old one-way marketing of doing things. So with this user-driven content, really the best place to start is typically by creating some user stories for how you want people or your personas to navigate through your website, what actions you want them to take. And then once you know that, those stories, you can start to either make changes to your existing website or kind of start over with what that content should look like and then create it from there. Our second trend is educational content. So this kind of piggybacks off the first trend a little bit. And it's also kind of a product of user-driven content and a user-driven website. Quality educational content is really at the core of everything website marketing right now, whether it's boosting your search engine rankings or increasing engagement on your website or launching effective email automation campaigns. All of those things really require you to have good, clear educational content. And so there's a couple of ways that you can incorporate that into your website. It's really going to depend on your goals of how you implement that, but some ideas might be blog posts, and that's a great way if your goal is to attract people to your website. If your goal is more to convert those visitors that you already have into leads, ebooks can be a great source of educational content. Another source of educational content would be a webinar like this. That can really fall into any category of goal based on what your content of that webinar is. So that might convert visitors into leads. It might close your leads into customers, or it could also kind of be increasing your loyalty of existing customers depending on the content that you include in that. And then another source of educational content would be emails. So that can help to close your leads, and then it can also be a way of increasing customer loyalty as well. In general, educational content as a website trend is beneficial to businesses because it gives you more power over the sales cycle. So it really allows you to educate your prospects through the buying process, turn them into leads earlier on versus at the end of the I'm ready to buy stage, and kind of control that sales cycle that your prospects are going to go through. Our third trend here is targeted landing pages. If you're not using targeted landing pages on your website, you're really missing out on a big opportunity to increase your conversion rates. And that is the percent of people who come into your website that end up filling out a form and becoming a lead. So when we implement targeted landing pages for our clients, we often see conversion rates go from around 0 to 2% up to 10 to 15%, and even as high as 20 to 30%, depending on different factors in industry and things like that. But really, just by optimizing your landing pages, your form pages on your website, that can be a huge potential to increase your website leads. So some key things that you want to include on your targeted landing pages in order to have success. You can see with the example here, there's no navigation. So when someone clicks on a call to action on your website and goes to a landing page or a form page, not having navigation there doesn't allow them to go navigate out to other areas of your website. It really gives them only one option of something to complete. You also want to have a clear heading of what it is you're offering. So whether it's a webinar, as in this example, or someone's requesting a quote, they're downloading an ebook, they're signing up for your email newsletter, whatever it is that you're offering to them, you want a clear headline that makes that really obvious. It's also important to have some bullet points of what the value is there. So you can see with the headline what you're getting, but why do I want that? Why should I get it? That's where those bullet points come into play. And then finally, you also want to make sure that your form is kind of in line or proportionate to whatever you're offering. So if someone's coming to your website and downloading an ebook, that really isn't, that ebook isn't worth their maybe phone number and company name and street address and all of those things to them, whereas it might be worth just their email address. Versus if your landing page is for requesting a quote or scheduling a demo or something that is more high value than a basic ebook or newsletter sign up, then it makes sense to include more fields on your form. So at that point, you might ask for a company name or a phone number or a street address or some of that information that you might need to know to effectively deliver on the quote or the demo or something like that. And then if you want to take your landing pages a step further, you could also use a similar strategy for your thank you pages. So someone comes to your landing page, fills out that form. With the thank you page, you do want to add the navigation back into the page and give people some options, but you also want to kind of give them a next step or offer to continue in the sales process. So for example, somebody might download an ebook on your website. You give them a thank you page with a link to access that ebook. You can also have another form on there to schedule a consultation or view a webinar that you have. some type of next step for them to take. So they're not just left with that ebook that they downloaded, but you're really kind of pushing them in the next direction for that sales process. Our next trend for 2017 websites is personalization and smart content. So if you think about all of the big online brands, you've got Facebook, Google, Amazon, just to name a few. They are all highly specific in their targeting. They give you the content that they think you want all the time. Everything is very personalized to your experience. And in 2017, we'll kind of see this to become more of a trend. I think it'll only increase. So you might not be on the same scale as Facebook or Google, but there are some tools that you can use with your website to kind of personalize the experiences for each of your visitors, leads, customers. And personalize landing pages or thank you pages by including a name, a company name, a location specifically on those pages. So the example here, welcome back, we've got a first name there. Also, another way to kind of improve your conversion rates with personalization and smart content would be by autofilling a form. So maybe someone's come to your website previously and downloaded an ebook. So you know their name, you know their email address, but you don't have maybe their company name or their role. Well, if they're looking at a landing page, you could autofill those first two fields and then maybe ask them just one or two more questions that can help increase your conversion rates by them knowing that you already have their information and giving them less work to do, less fields to fill out. Another way to use personalization in your website marketing would be in emails that you send out. So you can personalize the specific emails that someone receives, the content of those based on things like their title or their role or their industry, or if they've expressed an interest in a specific product or service that you offer. You can also personalize those emails based on specific pages someone's viewed or the number of times that they visited your website. So if someone comes to your website, fills out a form, then maybe they don't come back for 3 months or so, you could send them an email based on that period of time that they haven't been to your website. Hey, we miss you, come back, something along those lines. So there's a lot of different triggers that you can look at for customizing and personalizing that email content. And then another idea or way to use personalization would be not necessarily on your website, but more in the advertising realm. So remarketing or retargeting to visitors based on really any of the factors that we've talked about, page views, role, product interest, any of those. Our next trend relates to reinforcing the content on your website using things like testimonials, case studies, social proof. This helps you to establish credibility, build trust, and there's a couple of ways that you can do this. So the first way would be with testimonials. Collect quotes from your customers, showcase those on your website. Video testimonials are usually better just because they're more credible, more reliable, but even text testimonials are better than not having anything on your website at all. The best testimonials are typically quantifiable or have specific metrics in them of how you've helped someone or the results that they've seen from your product or your service. Another way to build credibility on your website would be through reviews. So these could be on your website or they could also be on other websites. So Google, Yelp, Facebook, all of those websites have ways for people to rate or review your business. Those can help when someone's out searching on Google or on Facebook, and then also you can include that content on your website. So having reviews on your website as opposed to testimonials might be in the case of you've got a specific product or specific products, rating between those to help kind of reinforce those specific products give people confidence in what they're looking at. Case studies are another good way to build that credibility. So that would be more of an in-depth account of how your product or service has helped a customer, usually in the shoes of a visitor who's reading that on your website. So your case study might tackle things like the specific problems and challenges that your customer had, what solution you were able to provide them based on that problem, what the outcomes were of that, and then usually having some type of testimonial or affirmation that that customer is actually as happy as you're saying they are. All of those things combined can reinforce really well your ability to do either your service or provide your product to people who are looking at the website. So that's great content to have on your website. Also great content to email out to prospects to kind of get them back into the website or nurture them through that buying process. And then the last category of establishing credibility on your website or online in general is social proof. So that's really linking specific people with your brand or your business. So an example might be if your business has thousands of likes on Facebook, someone goes and looks at your Facebook page and says, yep, this is a legitimate business. There's lots of people that like them. That's going to reaffirm with them that credibility factor. Another example would be somebody writes a review on Google. That's going to be attached with a specific person, a name, usually a photo. So that can be a great way, whether someone knows the person or not, that social proof factor of here's a person who has had this experience and written a review about it. I'm going to trust that. So those social proof factors can be just on the social platform, so just on Facebook, just on Google, or you can also incorporate them into your website. Facebook has some plugins that you can use to show people, all of their friends that like your business or your organization. Google, I think, has some tools like that as well. Our next trend for 2017, less content is more. This as a trend kind of relates more to SEO than just marketing and your website in general. But it still goes along with that idea of user-driven content, creating content for users versus kind of more product-focused or keyword-focused in the case of SEO. So as Google gets smarter, more content is created online. It gets really important to focus more on the quality of your content versus the quantity of it. It used to be we would just go and create a bunch of pages to target a bunch of keywords because Google's going to pick up on those keywords, and when someone searches for it, then you'll rank. In 2016 and especially moving into 2017, I think we'll see some more trends of Google moving away from crawling all of those pages that are less content focused on a specific keyword and favoring more of the high quality content pages that are more topically focused versus just specific keywords. We've seen just in 2016 a lot of examples of Google crawling maybe some low quality pages on a website, and then that preventing Google from crawling or indexing the main pages on a website that you want seen. And that's just based on if your content quality is low, Google's going to assume all of the rest of your pages on your website aren't going to provide users much value, and that can really hurt you in terms of SEO. So working to consolidate the number of pages that you're have on your website and focusing more on topics or keyword themes versus individual specific keywords can help to ensure your entire website is getting indexed and also improve your rankings by providing better content to users. Specifically related to the idea of keyword themes, I mentioned it's no longer necessary for specific pages for each of those keywords. So I'm not going to go into detail on how that works and why that works today, but there are plenty of resources if that's something you're interested in, kind of consolidating your content, improving the quality, and increasing your search engine presence in 2017. This is a big area to look at in terms of just consolidating your content on your pages. If you are going to kind of consolidate that content, you might find that it's not possible to include all of the content that you're looking to on an individual page. So that's where things like blog posts, ebooks, white papers can come into play. You have a really good quality page on your website. You want to provide some additional resources, link those out to some blog posts on those topics, as opposed to creating new pages on your website for that. Our next trend is interactive content. So how can you better engage users on your website, get them to stay on your site longer, get them to kind of find resources that are valuable to them? A couple of examples of this, and this is something you can really be creative with and think outside the box, but you might have some type of calculator, either calculating ROI or revenue potential. You might have some interactive maps, so allowing people to find a specific location of your business or view companies that you've worked with. There's different kind of ways that you might plot points and allow people to search through those. Also, kind of instant quoting tools, the ability, instead of just submitting a quote request form and then waiting a couple days for someone to get back with you, maybe the ability to change some numbers, see how that would affect things overall. And then graphs and charts just in general, that might be something specific to your industry. That's a good resource that people are looking for. So all of these are just interactive pieces of content that you can have on your website to keep people on the site longer and increase that engagement. Our next trend is automated email. In 2017 and even really in 2016, people expect an instant response if they're filling out a form on your website. So at a minimum for 2017, if you're not already automating thank you emails for form submissions, that should be a priority for you and for your website. Other than the thank you emails, there's really kind of two categories of automated emails that you can use. The first is external emails. So that would be emails that are going out to your leads, your customers. Thank you emails would fall into this category, like I mentioned, but also kind of drip email campaigns. So you might start a series of emails based on someone downloading an ebook. You might have some type of trigger that qualifies a lead, and you might start them on a drip based on that qualification. Also, new customers you might add to an automated email drip. So there's lots of ways that you can use that to further your sales process. Re-engagement would be another method. The second type of automated emails, other than external, is your internal. So those would be automating emails to your sales team to improve their efficiency, automate notifications to them. So those could be based on website engagement. It could be based on your lead scoring. If you're interested in more ideas for how to use marketing automation in 2017, we do have a webinar, Introduction to Marketing Automation, that you might want to check out. And then our last web trend for 2017, before we move on to kind of qualifying all of these ideas, is data-driven decisions. So in 2017, there's no need to guess or use your gut about what you should be doing on your website. You can use website analytics to learn things like how people are getting to your website, where they go once they get to your website, how long they're staying, what makes them convert or become a lead. And then you can also kind of split test anything in order to improve click rates on your call to action and the percent of people who get to landing pages. And then you can also test ways to improve your conversion rates on those landing pages. So in 2017, in order to get the most of your website and website marketing efforts, using data to drive the decisions that you're making is going to be the key to having success. So just as a recap, some 2017 website trends: user-driven content, educational content, targeted landing pages, personalization and smart content, case studies and testimonials, less content from a search engine side of things, interactive content or interactive features, automated emails, and data-driven decisions. At this time, I just want to remind you that if you do have any questions, feel free to tweet them using the hashtag WebPrep2017 or email those questions to im@webascender.com. So now you've got some ideas for ways to improve your website. Where do you start with making those improvements? That's what this next section is about, where to start and how to prioritize those. So your first step is going to be establishing your goals. What do you want to accomplish in 2017? Typically, anything that we do in terms of website improvements is going to fall into one of these 4 categories. So you're either trying to build your brand awareness, whether that's getting more traffic to your website, building a social media following. You might be trying to build your brand. You also might be trying to generate more leads. The third goal or category would be converting those leads into sales. And then the fourth category or goal would be to increase your customer loyalty. So kind of think about these goals, figure out what your priorities are for 2017, and then when you have that kind of in mind, you can start or organize your existing list, create a list of things you want to do to improve your website in order to accomplish these goals. So when you're going through this process of making a wish list of all of the possible improvements that you could make to your website, you kind of want to think through, okay, what is this feature going to help me accomplish, or how is this going to help me get to my goal? And then as you're doing that, take each of those wish list items and categorize them into the specific goals. So here we have an example of what that might look like. So if your goal for, or your main goal is to build your brand or increase your website traffic, some things that you might do is start blogging or be more consistent or strategic about your blogging efforts. You might also kind of have more of a focus on search engine optimization in order to rank for keywords that are going to bring more traffic to your website. You might focus on social media marketing and building your following there in order to build brand awareness overall. Or you might think we need an updated website design, something that's going to really improve our presence online. If you're kind of considering the goal of increasing leads from your website traffic, some things that you might consider would be split testing, some new calls to action or landing pages, running some paid search ads or remarketing ads, having some new offers, whether that's like a trial or a free consultation, different ways to get people to fill out your forms on your website and become leads. If you're looking to focus more, okay, we've got a good strong list of leads, we want to convert those leads into sales. Some areas that you might consider would be automated email drips. conversion optimization of existing leads to other forms on your website. You might also use remarketing in this, and then really utilizing smart content or personalization to know what someone's interested in, where they're at, and using that information to customize the content that they see. The final category would be to increase loyalty. So this might be either cross-selling existing customers or some type of referral program to get referrals from your existing customers. Automated emails can be a great way to do this. Email newsletters, remarketing as well. Also, some type of rewards or referral program might be something that you consider, and then providing some training or educational resources to those existing customers to continue to build that loyalty. So you've got your wish list. It's kind of categorized out into goals, but still might be a little bit overwhelming. So the next step is to prioritize these based on their projected impact. So with each idea on your wish list, we want to use what we call the 80-20 rule. So what 20% of tasks or improvements that you can make to your website are going to have 80% of the impact overall. So go through your list, evaluate the to-dos or improvements based on that, and then you'll end up with a much more digestible starting point that you can go through and start evaluating things. So once you've gone through the 80-20 rule, you've got a new task of 20% of improvements that you think are going to make the biggest impact on your business. Now we want to kind of qualify those and make sure that they're actually in line with what we're trying to do. So for each task, we want to evaluate the purpose and how that improvement's going to benefit your company overall. We want to evaluate the audience. Is this going to solve a specific problem for a persona or help this persona do something or get to some stage? We want to make sure that you've got the actual time to complete that task and that you have the resources needed to complete it as well. So once you identify the goals that you're trying to target, then make your wish list, trim it down based on the 80-20 rule, and then qualify it into a final list. You should have a task list that might look something like this, with specific goals you're trying to achieve and what tasks you're going to complete to do those. Then now that you have this list, you've got a couple options of how to tackle it. So you could try to go after all of these tasks at once. We're gonna kind of make a copy of our website and do all of these things and then launch them once we're completed. However, some things that you might run into is during the time it takes to do that, your goals might change. And you also might gather more data about how people are using your website. You might come up with some more ideas. So there's lots of things, roadblocks, changes that might happen throughout that process. So your second option would be to use a process to slowly make those improvements over time, kind of evaluate your wish list and your tasks on an ongoing basis, and then inform the decisions that you make around that with data from your website. So the second option is a short summary of what we call growth-driven development. Growth-driven development is a process for continuously implementing changes, evaluating your efforts, and improving your website. And so with the third section here, we're going to walk you through what that process could look like for continuously improving your website. So just in a nutshell, growth-driven development based on the idea that your website should always be improving. As a foundation for that, we kind of need to understand traditional web design and where the current process or way of doing things came from. So you might take that wish list or list of goals and tasks that you've created. Then you might kind of estimate and budget how long it's going to take, what it's going to cost to complete all of those tasks. Then you work on those tasks. Once they're complete, you launch your new and improved website. And then that website might sit for a year, 2 years, 3 years, or more. So you can see on this chart here, you've got your current website, then some time that it takes to implement all those changes, then you've got your new website. So some problems with this approach, the traditional web design approach, your website improvements are based on kind of gut feelings. They're not based on data or things that you're seeing or analytics, because it takes such a period of time to make all of those changes that things on your website or the way people are using things might change. So you're really making decisions kind of subjectively. There's not really a guarantee that what you're creating is going to be better than what you already have. It also takes a long time to make all of those updates or create your new website. So it can be 2, 4, 6 months to make all of those changes. Also requires a large upfront expense to do that. And then the process in general tends to be pretty unpredictable. So you might add new things, new ideas over time, which ends up extending out your timeline. You're late, you're over budget, you're out of scope. So what's the alternative? The alternative is growth-driven development. So this is more of an iterative approach to improving your website over time. So you still have your current website, then you have a shorter amount of time to make some improvements. You launch those improvements, then you might evaluate your results, take a look at your wish list. You might change some things around or reprioritize those, and then make your round 2 of improvements. So a couple things happen here. You're kind of eliminating that stagnant period after you launch your new site where it sits for a year, 2 years, 3 years. And it also allows you to drive your decisions and improvements based on the data and results from the previous iteration of your website. So it builds in time for adjusting based on results, and you're not doing everything at once and then launching it all at the same time. So here's kind of an example of what that old way might look like versus the new way. With the old way, you've got your ongoing list of tasks that you want to complete for your new website. You might be adding to this list over time, often extending the length of the project. And then when you do launch, you can't really isolate the results to specific things that you did because everything's launching at one time. You don't know what caused what to happen. With the new way, you've got a short list of things you're currently doing, a short list of things you want to do next, and then a good size list of all of the possible things that you could be doing that you'll eventually prioritize and get to. So this task list is a lot more fluid, it's a lot more flexible because you're doing things in shorter increments of time. It's also a lot easier to add new ideas to your brainstorming list and evaluate those with each iteration of your website over time. And then when you do launch a new iteration, you kind of know specifically what the source of your results were because those iterations are shorter, smaller. You're not launching as much every time you make a launch. So here's another way to look at the growth-driven development process. You start with a kind of discovery session. So you might evaluate some problems and some goals that you have currently. Some things that you might think about or problems that you might come up with are we need more website traffic, Or you might have a situation where you're looking through your analytics and you see everybody's leaving the site from page X, nobody's getting to page Y. How do we solve that? You may have a situation where you've got a landing page that gets a ton of visits, but no submissions. So this discovery session really allows you to evaluate your current status of your website, where you're at, and where you want to be. From there, once you know what it is that you want to solve, you can move on to the strategy stage. And there you can create a strategy and kind of outline a hypothesis or way that you're going to solve that current problem that came out of your discovery session. Once you have that strategy in place, you can move on to the execution stage. This is where you implement that strategy and launch that new iteration of your website with the goal of fixing that problem that came out of your discovery stage. Once that iteration is launched as part of the execution, you can then move on to the measurement stage where you're measuring the results of that iteration and then using the information, the analytics that came out of that to inform the next discovery stage. And then that process just starts over and you can see the continuous improvement of your website from there. We typically recommend that this process or this cycle would take around between 2 and 4 weeks to complete. So you'd be launching a new iteration of your website every 2 to 4 weeks, evaluating and going through the process again. So some benefits of growth-driven development or continuous improvement process for your website. You're launching new iterations of your website every 2 to 4 weeks instead of every 2 to 4 years. So that allows that constant improvement to happen. You're also making informed decisions based on the goals that come out of that discovery stage. So you don't set a list of goals and then do a bunch of things to try and match those goals. You're really working off of a specific goal at one time, and then once you kind of achieve that goal, you move on to the next. The changes that you make are testable. You can evaluate what you're working on, refine things as you go. And you can also use behavior reports from your visitors to evaluate and prioritize changes over time and kind of have a flexible to-do list based on how things are changing. And you also have a better ability to inform how marketing and sales teams work together with the website. So if you're serious about preparing your website for 2017, putting a continuous improvement process in place really is a must in order to get the most out of your website. And that brings us to a recap of the webinar. So we covered 2017 trends. Content quality is going to be really important in 2017, having quality educational resources on your website. Personalization of that content to your leads and customers, and then making your decisions based on the data. We talked about planning your improvements and prioritizing tasks based on your goals and then the projected impact of those. And we talked about growth-driven development, a process for continuously improving your website on a weekly, monthly basis throughout the year. At this time, I'd like to open it up for questions. So if you have questions, you can either tweet with the hashtag WebPrep2017 or email them to im@webascender.com. So our first question here, what tips what are tips for making existing web content more SEO friendly? So I covered this a bit. I think there's definitely a shift away from lots of pages targeting kind of similar keywords but different phrases, shifting more toward fewer pages with higher quality content, focusing more on keyword topics and themes versus just individual topics. So when you're thinking about optimizing your content on your website for search engines, really you should have a minimum of 600 to 1,000 words on a page. And that definitely is going to vary based on how competitive your keyword theme is or your industry or what you're trying to target. But having more content on the page that's targeted more around a topic or an idea versus just a specific keyword is where search engines are headed. With that, I think there are some older search engine tactics, optimization tactics that you still want to think about. So including links on your website between different pages, including photos and naming those properly, all of those kind of standard SEO ideas that we're used to still exist, but quality content is much more important and increasingly so than it used to be. All right, our next question, we are expanding our service area. How do we show up in search results for a neighboring town? So what I would recommend, and it really kind of depends on the keyword that you're targeting, so it's tough to make a call on this without more information, but you might probably try to add, you could create a blog post about it that says now offering service area in X town, and use that as your content and way of targeting that keyword versus creating a new page on your website for it. Another idea would be on your homepage to just kind of have a blurb about it, and that might link over to the blog post, but that would get that neighboring town name on your homepage, and then you would have that content on your blog post. If you're opening an office in the neighboring town, you would definitely want to add that office to Google Places, Google My Business, Google Maps, and get listed there to ensure that you would show up. So there's a couple ideas. Definitely more things that you can do to think through, but if you have any other questions on that, Nick, you can reach out to me and email me and I can give you some other ideas. All right, next question. What signs show that a website is ready for a higher investment in time and other resources? I don't think there were, I mean, I guess it depends where your website is currently, but as we talked about in the webinar, constantly improving your website or continuous improvement of your website is really necessary in order to take advantage of the new trends that are coming out, get new leads from your website, rank for new keywords. So I don't know that there's necessarily specific signs to look for. It's really, do you want to invest in a platform that's going to get you more brand awareness, more leads, help to nurture your leads into becoming customers? If the answer is yes, then you should think about making an investment in your website. Next question, how can I make testable changes to my website improvements? What should I test? So I think we talked about this a little bit as well, but there's really two key areas in terms of testing things to get more leads. Um, the first area would be your calls to action or your buttons on your website. And the goal of testing those would be to get more people to your landing pages. So you can test different colors or different designs of those calls to action and different copy as well, and with the goal of getting a higher click-through rate on those calls to action. The other area that you can test in order to improve those conversion rates would be the landing page itself. So how can you change either the headline on the page or the fields that are on the form, the color of the button or the text of the button to submit that form, maybe the photo on the page, or testing including a photo versus not including a photo. So there's definitely lots of things you can test on a landing page, but I would say those are the two areas that you would focus on with your testing would be calls to action and landing pages. You also always want to start with some type of hypothesis. So I'm going to make this change with the goal of this result. And then at the end of your test, you should be able to say, yep, I was right, or no, I was wrong, and then move on to your next test from there. Next question, will your presentation be available after this webinar? The answer is yes. We'll be sending out an email after the webinar with a link to the slides and a link to the recording. And if you missed anything or want to watch anything over, you'll be able to do that via the link in the email. Next question, what are the biggest changes you think websites will need to adapt to in 2017? So we've talked about a lot of trends and changes and things that you can implement. The biggest one, I think that's a little bit tricky of a question. It really probably depends on the website, but search engines are changing all the time, and if that is a big source of your traffic and your leads coming in, I think that's definitely an area that businesses need to be aware of and be on top of, and constantly monitoring those algorithms and making adjustments as needed. So the big trend that I mentioned is quality content versus quantity, focusing more on topics versus specific keywords. I think businesses who move toward that are going to have more success in search results. And I also think businesses who are consistent in their blogging efforts, constantly creating new blog posts, resources to rank for more, and new keywords are going to benefit in terms of search engine optimization as well. All right, I think that is all the questions that I have received or that have come in. If you asked a question and I didn't see it, you can email into im@webascender.com and I'll get to that. Or if you're listening to this later or the recording, you can always ask a question either via the hashtag or via email as well, and I'll get back to you. I want to thank everyone who tuned in today and who will tune in the future for attending the webinar today. And best of luck to all of you in preparing your websites for 2017.